Okay, so we're going to be talking about creating a banner for our website. We all have a Weebly website, and we want to create a banner for the top of it. And you can see on the example here, this Greg's Amazing Photo Store, this banner is not quite perfectly fit to the page. So here's what I did. I went and I got Grab, the program Grab, out of my utilities folder inside my applications folder. And when you press Grab, you get this menu at the top of the screen with a capture option. You can also just do a plain old-fashioned screen capture too, okay? I like Grab because it's got a menu. It's easy to deal with. So you do selection, and then I dragged it across like this and let it go, and then it creates a screen capture for me. So that's very useful for you guys for things that might be somehow protected, or you want to just actually grab a web page and use it as a graphic in a video or something like that. You could do a screen capture of it and then use it as a graphic element inside Final Cut Pro or Premiere. Does that make sense? All right, so this file then I would just save, and I'm going to call this screen cap. I'm going to put it inside a folder where I know where it is. Then in Photoshop, I'm going to open it, and it looks like this, okay? So I know exactly how big the banner should theoretically be to look nice on my web page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of crop that and say, yeah, I'd like a banner about that big. Does that make sense, what I'm doing? Now, I've got exactly the shape of banner I want for my website. So I'm going to go to crop. And when I crop it, then I get this shape, which is exactly the size that I need for my website. But I have this graphic element in here, so I'm just going to add a layer and then delete the other one. And now look what I get. A perfect blank template for my banner. Does that make sense? Okay. To start a document in Photoshop, basically what you need to do is go to File. I'm just kind of looking at these numbers here so I can get an estimate of what size I should tell you. I'm going to say 900 by 150. Yeah, let's do 900 by 150 for our template. So we're going to go into File, New, and I'm going to name this right off the bat. Okay, so if anything happens to this file, it's already got a name. It's going to get auto-saved. The computer, crashes or gets shut off, whatever. So I'm going to call it my last name, banner, and a V number. Now I'm going to put V number in there because just like in GarageBand, I want to know which version of this project I'm working on. There might be many versions of this banner that I want to make. This one is my first draft, so I'm going to call it V1. And if I make major changes to it, and I want to save those variations so I can go back, I'm going to call it V2. Make sense? So I want it to be 900 by 150 pixels. If you make it 900 inches by 150 inches, it's going to be a massive file. So be careful about being specific. So we got pixels, and we want it to be 900 by 150. And I'm going to leave the resolution at 300. It's better to start with a higher resolution and then scale it down because you can't go the other way. You can't make a small graphic and make it look better by making it bigger. It never works that way. You've all seen presentations or printed documents where something is low res and it looked really blocky and didn't look nice. That's because it was too low resolution to begin with, and then they probably scaled it up and it looked even worse. The color mode for everything you're doing that is going to either the internet or a video or a computer screen of any kind should be RGB. So you leave RGB as it is. Now the background contents. White is basically the way we think about paper, okay? Unless you're going to video with this graphic, then you can leave the background as white, okay? Because otherwise you could pick the background color that's preset over here, which is a pinky purple, or the transparent, which is this checkerboard. Now that'll make sense to you when you start to edit video, because if you want to create graphics and titles with Photoshop to put in your video, then you need a transparency layer, which is that checkerboard. Okay? That way you can put text in a video and it doesn't have a background at all. But for what we're doing, which is making a solid banner for your website, we're better off just making it a white background. And we press OK. And then what you get is a big rectangle. Congratulations. So what do we do with this rectangle? Well, this assignment is to make a banner, and it has to have at least 3 graphic elements in it: a background, text, and an image. By the end of the semester, all of the images and all the graphics on your website need to be original. But today, just for demonstration purposes and for you learning how to work this, you can take any images you want and put them into this graphic. Does that make sense? All right. Yes?
What is it, live Photoshop or something?
I will get to that after this demo real quick. Now, how does Shrek work? The big green guy. How does he work? Shrek works in layers. Come on, get with it. Photoshop 2 works in layers. The layers here are the invisible pieces of acetate that you used to use to make a poster. To make a poster before Photoshop, you used to have to go to a photo shop and make a poster. So there was a rostrum camera, which is essentially a working graphic board with a pipe sticking out of it, and on the top of that pipe was a camera. And if you wanted to make a poster, you would get a piece of paper that was the size of the poster, or the same shape as the larger poster you're going to print, and you would put the graphics on that paper. And if you wanted to be able to move one of those graphics, they either had to be cut out or on a piece of clear plastic called acetate. And you would make multiple layers of graphics on this background, and then you'd use the camera to take a picture of it. And that would be your poster. Then you'd have a negative from the camera, which you would then do a photo print of, send it to the printer, and then you would get your poster. Or an ad for a magazine or a newspaper. That's how you would lay out those things, by actually moving graphic elements on paper. Photoshop is a Photoshop simulator. So all of the things that we used to do with actual paper and scissors and glue is exactly what you're doing here. Now, if I wanted a background color, I would go and get the paper I wanted with the right color. But here in Photoshop, what do? Well, I go down here. Let's go through our toolbox first. Starting from the bottom, of course. Why not? We'll start from the bottom, and this foreground color is our dominant color. When we click on that swatch, we can select that out of any of these millions of colors available to us. So we can drag across here and pick and drag and figure out exactly what color we want. Get it? And I press OK, and that becomes my foreground color. If I click down here, I could set my background color. And there we go. Now I have 2 colors here in my color swatches. If I don't like those colors, or I just need to get back to black and white, I can just hit the default button, and then you get black and white. If I need white as my foreground color and black as my background, I can just hit the arrow here, and it switches between the two. See? Okay. So we always go back to black and white. Right above it is our zoom. So when I click that, I can zoom in, or I can right-click and then zoom out, or I can hold the option button and zoom out like that. See? So if I click on it, I can zoom in. If I click option, I can zoom out. When I right-click with my mouse on a Mac, I get a menu like this. How many of you cannot right-click on your trackpads? Do you know how to do that? Okay. Hold the control button and press down on the trackpad. And you will get a menu that pops up, which is your right click. Now Macs are pretty smart. Even though it's one big trackpad, you can actually go into system preferences right here. If you go to trackpad, oh, I don't have a trackpad. This isn't a laptop, sorry. If you go into trackpad, you will be able to go into the options and turn on the right clicking. If you click in the bottom right corner of the trackpad, you can actually engage a right click on your trackpad. So on your laptops, you do have the ability to right click on your trackpad. So here, without the right click, I can just hit Control and it'll bring up the menu. The Fit on Screen command just zooms in to the width of the screen. So that's really helpful when it comes to workspace, but it's larger than the actual resolution, so it's going to look a little grainy, which is okay. The real way to tell what your graphic is going to look like on screen is by right-clicking and going to actual pixels. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is the size as it will be on the internet. Let's go to the top of the tools here, and the Move tool is our first tool. When you use any of the tools in the toolbox, the parameter controls are at the top of the screen. If you're using Photoshop Elements, the controls will be at the bottom of the screen, okay? If you're signed up for Photoshop Creative Cloud, that's the full program parameters at the top of the screen, okay? Now, I'm going to use these two controls frequently. Knowing how to use and when to use auto select and show transform controls is very important. Basically, you can always leave show transform controls on. And what that will do is it will create control nodes where you can resize the element on the screen. Auto select, I'll show you how that works as we get to it. The next thing here is our selection of marquee tools. So how do we select pixels? How do we manipulate the pixels? We do that with the marquee. All right, let's start off here. I'm going to create a banner for a new production company. I want it, let's say the client's color. They give you a specific color. You can actually put the color in here. There are percentages. There's a hex number right here. So if they have the hex number or they have a website, you can go take their logo or their color sample, put it in Photoshop, and you can get the hex number so you can match the color correctly. So let's say this seafoam green kind of color is theirs, and we're going to make that our background. All right. I'm going to go here to this gradient tool. If it's a bucket there right now, hold down on it, and then you'll see the gradient tool. So there's a couple of tools inside of each of these buttons, and they pop out when you hold them down. So I want the paint bucket, and then I'm just going to click right here, and it fills in that rectangle. There we are. Okay, so that's how the paint bucket works, just like MS Paint when you're a kid working on the PC, right? You know, how to scribble, and then you can fill up all the spaces with paint colors. That's exactly how Photoshop works. I want to take that seafoam green, but I only want it to be faded. I want to go from white to that seafoam, which is exactly what I've got here. You can see that my foreground and my background colors are set. Then I'm going to take the gradient tool. If you look at the top of the screen here, you'll see that the gradient tool allows you a bunch of different choices. The first one is foreground to background. The next one is foreground to what? What's the checkerboard mean? Transparent, yes. This one is a preset black to white. This one is a preset from red to green with puke in the middle. You gotta be careful with these, right? It's pretty ugly. And then you got the chrome, or looks like kind of a desert. So you could do any of those presets. I'm just gonna use the foreground to background, and then I'm good. So right here, I'm gonna take that gradient tool and watch what I do. Just grab from top to bottom, or bottom to top, and then the green is at the bottom, the foreground is the first click, and where you let go is where the background is. So you could play around with that a little bit, and you can see this one goes from green on the left to white on the right, because that was the orientation that I pulled the line. See that? And the closer together the clicks are, the harder the edge between the green and the white. Does that make sense to you? So the longer you pull, the longer the gradient is, the softer the fade from one color to the other. Okay, so I'm going to go from the top to the bottom, and there we go. Good with that. The next tool I want to show you is the text tool, but if we click the text tool right now, look at what color will come up as the text. It's currently set for that white right up here. See, this is the parameter controls for the text. Now, that is incredibly hard to see, right? Even large. Well, there are a bunch of things we could do with that. A, we could just change the color, make it darker, or we could outline it. So I'm going to go for the outlining. Let's come up with a name for the company. Give me a name for this fictitious company. We have a fictitious company name. This is the creative class, right? Come on, come on. You guys are killing me. Give me a company name. Malia, give me a company name. No, no, no. Malia
Oh, for me?
and Co. How about that? Oh, it kind of looks like Tiffany Company, doesn't it? All right, so there's our company name. Now look at this over here. This is our layers menu. Oops, sorry. There's our background, and it's locked. There's our text layer, and it's named already because, fortunately, it puts whatever you type in for a text layer in there as a label. The other ones don't get labels until you double click it and put a label in. So background's fine. To unlock this layer, you need to hold down Option and double click that lock. So if you want to edit that layer or get rid of the background layer, put a new one in, whatever you want to do, you can unlock it like that. You can also relock it, and then you just need to Option double click it. Oop, what happened? There we go. You just unlock it by clicking that again once you put a lock on it yourself. Okay, so we got Malia and Co. If we select that layer, then we get these transform controls. Do you see the transform controls? If I shut that off, they go away. Now I cannot stretch it. I can move it, but I can't stretch it. I can't resize it. So it's good to have those transform controls up, because then I can grab a corner of the transform control like this, and I can do that. But what happens if I get it too close like this? Nobody likes that, right? Nobody likes a squishy font. Everybody wants their font to be exactly the way it's specified. So how do you make sure you always have the right aspect ratio for your font? What do you have to hold?
Control.
Shift. But thank you for playing. There you go. So there we go. Okay, now I'm going to show you a nice little secret hidden inside the layer itself. If you look down here, you'll find this little FX button, but I like to use this right here, which is just double clicking the open space in the layer, and then you get a dialog menu like this, which is a layer style. Layer styles find the edges, the edge pixels of whatever's in that layer, and it applies this effect to those pixels. Watch this. Stroke is outline. Okay, so if I click this and turn it on, then I get the outline. Okay, gets really easy. Now if I want to control how thick that outline is or what color it is, I would click right on here to highlight it, and then I could change the size to enormous proportions, or get it down to something that looks a little more classy like that. I could change the opacity of it. There we go. I want it on the outside. I don't want it on the inside. Center's a little weird. Let's go to outside. Okay. I can also change that color. Instead of it being a black, now there's the exact color of the background, so that's not doing much. But if we make it darker, hey, that looks kind of cool. A little minty. I like it. I can also add a drop shadow. Look at that. It's like instant pro results. How about that? I can also bevel it. And now I've got something that's a little more dimensional. And we're getting there. Now, your next part of this is adding images. So, we go online shopping here. And we want to get a camera icon. So I've already been looking here. Now I want to get one that is similar to the style of what I'm going for. So I'm browsing. And when I click on them, here, let's just go with this one. Okay, this one has a transparency already. See that? Now I'm going to click on that. Sorry, I'm going to right click on that and I can download that image. Now, you will be tempted just to drag things right into the photo you're working on in Photoshop. Don't do that because it makes this thing called a smart object, which takes an extra step to make it something you can edit. So bypass all that misery, and here's what we're going to do with Photoshop. When you open an image and you download it, and you want to use that image, then drag it to, oh, I'm sorry, that was a vector. Let me just grab this one. Download that image. Instead of dragging it into the graphic in Photoshop, you could just drag it right to the icon. See that? I went right from Google. If I took this one, this might work too. Yep, that worked too. So I could take that and put it right in Photoshop via the icon. And then it'll open here at the top of the screen, and I can keep going back and forth between all of my open projects in Photoshop. Get it? So this is the one I want to work with. How do I get just the camera selected so I can put it into Photoshop? What do you think there, Corey? It is currently what? A save as. It's a JPEG.
There's like a little long button that you can click the outside.
Okay. Let's go through those and let's see what those options are. Now, the marquee is how you select pixels. So I want to select just the camera. So there might be a little tricky thing that I'm going to show you here. Tell me whether this is a good solution or not. A rectangular marquee. This is what it does. I would have to, with the rectangular marquee, get in here and start laying down all of these shapes to make this marquee happen. Does this seem like a logical thing to do? Seems pretty tedious, right? You wouldn't want to do that. All right. What about the elliptical? We don't want to do that either, right? That's not going to help us. What about this lasso tool? Can we get in there and do this kind of thing where we can draw around something? Well, that gets pretty sloppy, doesn't it? You don't want to do that either. No? You're a hard bunch to please, I tell you that. What about a polygon? This might work. Watch. We can go all these hard surfaces. We can get right in there and we can click and add all these little lines and go around the whole thing. And no, you're not impressed with that either, huh? Jeez. All right. Let's try the magnetic lasso. This might work for you. Ooh, well, at least it's quick, right? what it's doing is it's trying to find all of the pixels that are in contrast with that white. So, hey, it looks like we got a possibility here. What do you think about this one, Corey? No? It works?
The other one doesn't match the clip though.
I think the results of this, though, is going to look like a kindergartner went at it with scissors. Right? It's not going to look too pleasing. Let's try something else. Hey, magic wand. It's magic. It's got to work, right? All right, at the top of the screen, remember I said the parameters are controlled up there for each of the tools in the toolbox? The magic wand has this thing called tolerance, which is right there. I'm going to select this white with the magic wand, and look at what happens. It has automatically found every white pixel that is congruous, meaning attached to the pixel I selected. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? What's the problem? Well, I want the camera. I don't want the white. I selected all the white because it was easy. It's one color. It's easy to make that marquee. Now what do I have to do?
You can delete the white and then it'll select just the camera.
Close, close, close. I would go to select at the top of the screen and see that command, the inverse. Watch what happens when I inverse. Visibly nothing. But what has just happened is the marquee is now around the camera. See? So I'm going to select all of that. It's just selected. I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to make it smaller to fit. But now I have exactly what I wanted. You see how you could see through where the white background was? And I press enter, and then it draws it in. Now it's good to go. I'm highlighting that text, and I'm going to change the color. I'm going to go dark with that one. There we go. Now if I want to change the size, I can just hit the move tool while it's still highlighted and grab a corner. Hold shift, it stays in the right aspect ratio. I can do it that way. Okay. Now my client says, I love it, but I want the camera on the other side. And I say, let's move it then. Let's see what happens. I'm going to pull this up a little bit so it's a little closer. Okay, now over here in the layers palette, you see that? See the little preview? The camera? If I poke it in the eye, that layer goes away. See that? So I can mute layers, and that really helps organize things. Now, with that selected, I can move that just by grabbing it. See that? If I have auto select on, Photoshop is trying to figure out what thing I'm trying to click. So with auto select on, if I miss something or if I hit it in the middle, here that works, but here, look what happens. So I'm selecting, or Photoshop is automatically trying to pick the thing that it thinks I want to move with auto select on. So sometimes that's useful, sometimes that's not useful. When it's not useful is when you've got things over the top of another thing and you need to move it. So if you turn auto select off, the only thing that moves is what is selected here in the layers palette. So if I select the camera layer and I want to move the camera layer, look, I can grab over here. It doesn't matter where I grab, as long as I grab inside the frame, it'll move that element because I'm selecting the entire layer and it's not on auto select. You with me on this one? Get it? Okay. So I'm going to put this over here. Now look at this. This is kind of peculiar. I can also use the arrow keys to move it pixel by pixel. Okay. The multimedia productions is in front of the camera, but the other text is behind it. Why is that? Yeah.
You did the bottom text last, the layer on top of the camera.
It did. Put it on top of the layer right there. That layer went on top. It's just like PowerPoint. You have to arrange the elements for height. You know what's on top of the other element. So the same thing goes here. If I take this camera element and grab it and put it under the text, then that all works, right? All right. So there's the camera. And if I can highlight these two layers, just like that, I can move both of them simultaneously this way. Just like that. Okay, now I'm pretty happy. The client likes that. I can center the whole thing. Oops. Undo. Select this one. Now I have all three layers selected. I'm just going to center like this, and I'm okay. Now, what do I do? How do I get this on my website? Yes.
You have to export it as a JPEG.
Exactly. You guys were just in GarageBand, right? Your GarageBand project is your master. You exported an MP3, which was a copy of that master, correct? Now here, Photoshop documents these PSDs, that .psd, that's what this file is. So when I go to File and I press Save, look what it's saving it as. PSD, okay? Where? I'm going to put it in my cloud or wherever I've set up to save it, and I'm going to hit Save. Now my master file is saved with all those layers in it. I can't do anything with that file except edit that image in Photoshop. Which is not totally true, because I can actually take that PSD into Final Cut Pro and use the layers. But that's not for this class. So your .psd is your master file. Be careful with it. What I want to do to get this out to the web is File, Save As, and this is very noteworthy right here. When you go to the Save As dialog, you need to change the format from Photoshop to JPEG. Right there. Then you're going to get these options, which are the quality control. You could slide that all the way to the right to large file and press save. And it'll take that, make a flat JPEG out of it, and put it on your hard drive. I'm going to make one change here, which is driving me nuts. I really, really don't like that. Minty green. There we go. There, that's nice. All right, then I'm going to save that as a variant. So I'm going to call that, make that a JPEG, and V2. Save that as well. Now, when I go to Weebly and I want to change this, I'm going to trash this banner up here, which is ill-fitting, and then it goes back to the name on Weebly. And I want to make it a logo, so I click logo, and it says, oh, fine, all right, drag one here. Now I've got to find it. It's on my desktop, and I want to look at that one. That's the one. So I'm going to drag it into here, and then it puts it in. And if I press edit, I can stretch that out to the size I made it for. And press save. And there we go. No applause, nothing. I can't believe it. I worked so hard for these.